Good evening, everybody. I can see there's lots of people still coming in, which is fantastic. Um, going to do a few housekeeping bits and pieces, and then we will make a start. And hopefully by then, most people will have managed to join. So my name's Aileen. I am one of the senior conservation officers for fungi here at Plant Life, and I am joined today by my colleague Rich, who's also a senior conservation officer for fungi. Um, Rich is going to be in the Q&A later when we're talking about, well, answering any of your questions that you might have throughout the presentation. And then my colleague Rachel is behind the Plant Life account. So if anybody's having any technical issues throughout the webinar today, then by all means stick something in the chat and hopefully she'll be able to give you a hand. If you do drop out at any point, then you should be able to rejoin with the same Zoom link. This session will be recorded, so you will be able to access this at a later point. If you have any questions that you would like answering in the Q&A at the end, there should be a Q&A function that's down at the bottom. This is separate than the chat function. So please stick your questions in there and that'll help us to find any duplicates and that kind of thing and prioritize questions for the Q&A at the end. But by all means, if you have other bits and pieces or you want to introduce yourselves, then the chat is a great place for that. If you go down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, they should be available at the bottom there. Okie dokie. It looks like we're starting to slow down slightly on numbers of people coming in now, and we're 1 minute past 7. So let's get cracking with the presentation. So today we're going to be talking about Waxcap Watch and primarily how to get involved in 2025. So I've got a few different bits and pieces to cover. I'm going to be talking about what grassland fungi are, the importance of them, history of Waxcap Watch, results from the first 5 years of Waxcap Watch, and then how to get involved and a bit about the details of the survey itself, so that hopefully everyone here will finish this webinar feeling confident to give a survey a go themselves this year. So, what are grassland fungi? In many ways, this is self-explanatory, fungi that are found in grasslands, but specifically we're talking about a group of fungi that quite often are known as the Chegd fungi. So this is an acronym that's based on the Latin names of this group of fungi, and they're particularly found in certain types of grasslands. So grasslands that don't have that have low nutrients, so are not fertilized, and that are quite often they are grazed or mown, and if they're mown the clippings are removed and that helps to keep the nutrients down, and also haven't had soil disturbance, so they aren't areas that have been ploughed recently, that kind of thing. So typically these are in areas that we'd think about as ancient grasslands, and that can be upland sheep grazed hills, but it could also be areas like churchyards, local playing fields that get their grass cut regularly, but are not necessarily agricultural land. It can be grasslands in all different types of areas. We have lots of people who do Waxcap Watch surveys in their own gardens. So let's talk a bit about this Chegd fungi acronym, because I think it can be a bit confusing if you've not come across it before. So yeah, as I said, it's based on the Latin names of the kind of 5 groups of fungi that are within this group. Now, fungal taxonomy is changing all the time at the moment. There's lots of DNA sequencing going on, which means that everything's getting a bit shifted around. So some of these are a bit jumbled together, but it still works well enough at the moment. So to start off with, we have our corals, our clubs, and our spindles. And so these do look a bit like corals that you would find in the ocean. They are often relatively small, and they kind of have these branching or spindle type structures. And we have one species in particular that we particularly focus on in Waxcap Watch, which is the violet coral, which forms part of this group. Next, we have our waxcaps. These are kind of the most well-known of this group, and part of that is because they're the easiest to identify. Some of the others in this Chegd group are quite challenging, but the waxcaps are much more straightforward, which is great. They come in all sorts of bright colours, and so they can be really distinctive in these kind of grassland habitats. And we have various different ways that we can think about the number of waxcap species that we find in a site and how important that might be. So if we've got over 17 species of waxcap in a single site. That makes something of the site of national importance for its grassland fungi assemblage, which is great. Next, we have our entalomas, our pink gills, and these are so called because they have pink spores. So if you ever see the gills of these fungi, the underneath of the cap, sometimes the gills will actually be tinged a bit pink where all the spores are falling out. We have our earth tongues. Again, this is one of the groups that's really shifting around a lot at the moment with the taxonomy and DNA sequencing changes. These are really tiny, so you're probably only likely to see earth tongues if you're really on your hands and knees crawling around in the grass. But they're really interesting species to see. And then finally, our dermalomas, our crazed caps. So you can kind of see in this photo this kind of cracking effect on the top of the cap, which can be a feature of some of the species in this group. So that's our Chegdi fungi. So these are the type of fungi that we're talking about when we say grassland fungi. These fungi are really important. So in the UK, we're kind of a stronghold for these fungi, but internationally they are very threatened. Quite a lot of the species in this group have been red listed by the IUCN, so they've had an assessment as to their extinction risk globally, and lots of them are quite at risk. So there's lots of them that are vulnerable, for example, which puts them in the same threat level as giant pandas and snow leopards. And recognizing these grassland fungi can really help us to identify our most important ancient grassland sites. So ancient grasslands are not just important for their plants, they're also very important for their fungi as well. And that's part of one of their features that we want to recognize. So we do have challenges. There are lots of threats that grassland fungi face. So we do have a lack of mycologists and a lack of ecologists who have experience in fungi. Even if you do have the skills, identifying these grassland fungi sites can be quite difficult. Fungi don't fruit necessarily every year, and that can mean that it can take multiple years and multiple surveys to get a really good assessment of what a site actually looks like and what species are present there. There's limited requirements and funding available to actually do the surveys, so they might not necessarily get done. And then there's the threats like changes in land use, so intensive farming, land use change, tree planting can all potentially cause damage to grasslands just by decreasing the amount of habitat that's available for these fungi. And so this is where Waxcap Watch kind of came in as a way of addressing some of these challenges, a step towards it to help people identify and help us to create a database of where grassland fungi and these sites might be. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the history of it and how we actually came to the point of having Waxcap Watch. So we have a long history of field mycology in the UK, which is fantastic. But I think previously there had been a lot of this had been dominated by woodland habitats, which have fantastic fungal communities, but grasslands had previously been quite overlooked. But this changed particularly in the mid 1990s when the British Mycological Society launched their Waxcap Grassland Survey, and this massively increased the number of records that were coming from the field mycology community in grasslands. We had further changes. In 1999, the new Biodiversity Action Plan incorporated 3 different grassland fungal species, so the pink waxcap, date waxcap, and the olive earth tongue. In the early 2000s, this is where plant life then became involved, where as part of the Back from the Brink project, we had a project doing a pink waxcap survey. So this was in association with the British Mycological Society, the Association for British Fungal Groups, and then the RSPB. And this was particularly looking at records for pink waxcap and a couple of other species, which are pictured here, the parrot waxcap and the blackening waxcap. And this was kind of the beginning of plant life's work, at least with grassland fungi and this kind of volunteer recording. At this point, we didn't have an app. It was all paper-based, and so Plant Life posted out thousands of different thousands of recording forms out to people. And I, for one, I'm very glad that today I don't need to post out thousands of recording forms across the UK. 2003, a landmark report from English Nature, now Natural England, by Shelley Evans, collated over 20,000 records for grassland fungi across England. And this was the first time that all of these records had been collated, which was a fantastic step for grassland fungi in England. In 2004, this is where a really important article was published by Gareth Griffiths and a number of his colleagues on grassland fungi in British wildlife. And this was where the first concept of the kind of Waxcap Watch survey and thinking about this colour-based survey really came in. And then in 2020, Plant Life, we, based on that work from Gareth Griffiths and his colleagues, we then use that work to base our Waxcap Watch survey. We develop our app and it gets launched as part of our Magnificent Meadows project. And from there, it's gone on to where we are today. And it's going from strength to strength, which is really fantastic. And hopefully lots of you here on the call today have either been involved already or would like to get involved in this. And hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel confident to go out and do your own survey. So the survey itself is, like I said, it's colour-based. So primarily when you found your grassy habitat that you're surveying, you're looking for the different colours of fungi that are there. And depending on which species are there, or which colours are there, we then give that a score based on how common or rare those species are. So the scoring that I'm showing here on the screen is the scoring that we've used for the first 5 years of the survey. We've done some tweaks to that this year. Myself and Rich, my colleague, have been doing some adjustment based on which species we now know are more common or more rare. And so you might see some slight differences in what your scores look like compared with what these ones are here. But because I'm going to be talking about some of the results from the first 5 years of the survey, I thought that this was more relevant to show in terms of the scoring. We do have, previously we had 2 and we now have 3 individual species that we do record through the app. So we have the pink waxcap, the violet coral, and now we've added an additional waxcap, the blushing waxcap, onto that. So these are particularly distinctive species which are relatively easy for beginners to identify, but they're also indicator species. So if you find these species, then you're likely to have lots of other grassland fungal species there. So we've had a massive number of people who have volunteered their time and recorded through Waxcap Watch so far, which is fantastic. So a total of 853 people, which is brilliant. Most people currently only get involved in 1 or 2 years. This is something we'd like to change. So we'd like to have people consistently recording over a number of years. And so we hope this is something that as the years go on and people get involved and enjoy being part of it, that they will continue to record each year. We've had 2,151 surveys, and I had a little look earlier on at how many surveys we've had come through so far this year, and it's 168 so far, which is fantastic. And that's across 1,913 sites. So we have got some sites that have been surveyed multiple times. And you can see in the pie chart on the right here that we do get all different sorts of habitats that people survey. So obviously agricultural areas is a big part of that, but you can also see that lawns and amenity grasslands, so that's places like football pitches, that kind of thing, also form a really significant proportion of the areas that are surveyed. And it's fantastic that we're getting all different sorts of areas, both in more urban and more rural areas, that are getting surveyed. One area of analysis that we've done this year is to do some comparisons between the species data that we collect through the app, so that's our pink waxcap and our violet coral data, and compared that with the British Mycological Society's database, to compare the sites that have been recorded by our volunteers and then the sites that were already in the existing database. And what we found was quite surprising, which is that we really don't have a lot of overlap between these databases at all. So we've got over 300 new sites for the pink waxcap across the UK and 80 new sites for the violet coral, which is a really interesting and powerful result, and shows that the impact that this data collection by our surveyors can have. And so we want to do more work on this. So we want to go back to these sites and have a look and see what other species are there, do that species level recording there. But we also want to do some comparisons with other databases as well. So there's lots of different fungal recording databases across the UK. The British Mycological Societies is one of the big ones, but it's not the only one. And so we want to do some comparisons with these other databases as well, and see what this data looks like across these other data sources. So let's have a little chat about what is going on in 2025. So I mentioned already that we have made some changes to the survey this year. If you've done the survey before, it's not going to look massively different, so don't panic, it's not a huge change. But we've made these changes based on trying to give the survey the biggest conservation power possible. But also looking at the feedback that we've had from our volunteers in previous years. So I mentioned about the colour groupings. So there's some changes. So for example, previously we had a yellow colour grouping and an orange colour grouping. But as we've reviewed that this year, it's become very apparent that most of the yellow wax caps can also be orange, and most of the orange wax caps can also be yellow, depending on their context. And so now we've joined those two groupings together. So now we just have a yellow and orange colour grouping. And so there's some other things like that. We've added more options to take photographs. So this is something that was a lot of feedback from our volunteers, that they wanted to be able to take more photos and send in photos of the species that they're seeing. We've particularly added this in for the species that are going to be more rare, so we can do some validation where possible of the species from the photos. And as I mentioned, we've also added one additional species to our species level records, which is the blushing waxcap, which is this kind of dark brown black with some red blushing tones. So it's quite a gothic looking waxcap. It's very rare. And so if we get any records of it, that will be amazing. But it'll be really interesting to see how that features in our records this year. It's something that's been some recent analyses that have been done. It's a species that's been flagged as a really, really strong indicator species, and that if you find this species, you've almost certainly got a fantastic site for grassland fungi. And so it'll be great to see what data we can collect now that we've added this additional species. We have 10 in-person training events this year. These are fully booked at the moment, but we do have waiting lists for all of them, apart from one, which is a Scotland one, which was this weekend, so that's already been and gone. But if you are keen, then it's worth joining the waiting list, because we might have some last-minute cancellations. For those of you that can't get a spot on the in-person training events, or they just don't work for you, we also have an online training course, and this takes you a step further than Waxcap Watch, so it's a really great way of building your knowledge. It's divided into 4 units, so you can take it at your own pace, and it's a great way of building on your knowledge from Waxcap Watch and starting to think more in depth about identifying grassland fungi, particularly waxcaps, to species level. And then the final thing is our Waxcap Watch Facebook group. So this is very much community-led, and it's a really fantastic resource for looking at those species level IDs. And we are really grateful to all of the people within the mycological community that take that time to be involved in that group. So it's a really great resource. So I'd highly recommend that you take a look at that Facebook page. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk you through the process of downloading and completing your own survey. There's a few little things that can be a little bit confusing about this, and I want everybody to come out of this webinar feeling confident that they could do their own survey and they're not going to be hit by too many technical issues along the way. So I've incorporated a bunch of screenshots on the right hand side of my screen of the process that you would go through if you're downloading onto your mobile phone or a tablet. If you're doing it on desktop, it will look slightly different, but the process will be very similar. We do have instructions on our website for both, and we can provide even more detail if you're still having technical issues after this. So the Waxcap Watch survey is hosted through a ArcGIS Survey 123 app. So the first stage in the process is to download that. So you go to your Google Play Store or your Apple Store and search for Survey 123, and you'll find that to then install. So that's your first part of the process. Once you've got that downloaded, you then need to head over to our Waxcap Watch page on our website. This is the kind of thing you'll see immediately. This is the top of the page, and scroll on down to the download the app section, and there's a link in there where it says step 2, open this link on your smart device. Click there, and once you've done that, you should get this part open, which gives you the option to either open in browser or open in the Survey 123 field app. Now, if you're doing this in browser, obviously click open in browser, and this is where it will look slightly different. But if you're doing it on mobile, which is what I would recommend if you have that option, because it means things like your location data and things like that will be more straightforward, then click open in Survey 123. Your Survey 123 app will then open like this. You don't need to sign in or have a login. You can just click continue without signing in, and it should work completely fine. So you click continue without signing in. It will give you a pop-up that says allow to access this location. Click yes to this. The way that we've designed the survey means that it will then, when you're using the survey, it will collect your location data automatically, which means you don't need to find your own grid reference and that kind of thing, and it gives us really accurate location data for the surveys that people are doing. So that's the reason that we have the location data on here. And then you should have the survey ready to go. So you'll then get a page open like this, which is the beginning of the survey. And hopefully that's a relatively straightforward process. If you are having any issues with the downloading the survey, obviously the recording of this will be available online. We have instructions on our website, and then we also have some more detailed troubleshooting instructions that we can send you via email if you're still struggling or if things aren't working. And then in terms of the survey itself, so this is the first page of the survey. You have the option of having it in English or in Welsh throughout the whole survey, not just the first page, to be clear. The first page of the survey is just a little bit of information about yourself, so your first name, surname, email address. This just gives us that we can see how many people are doing the survey and whether we've got people doing kind of repeat surveys across years, that kind of thing. Then on the next page, it talks you through a bit about the kind of area that you're in. So the data that I was showing you about the types of grassland that people are in, and the location and all that kind of stuff, that's what's on this page. If you've done a survey before, this is a page that will look quite different. We used to ask a lot of different questions about the habitat that was there, but we found that was becoming quite overwhelming and wasn't necessarily as helpful as we initially thought from a conservation perspective. So we've really slimmed that down to make it more straightforward for our volunteers. And then we got into our questions about the waxcaps themselves. So there's options for all the different colours. There's various examples of what different, slightly different colour variations within those groupings can look like. Something to be aware of is that for some of the colours, you might get a drop-down menu that comes up asking you for slightly more details. And so these are some of the things that we've added in this year to help us narrow down within some of the groupings which are the rare species and which are the more common ones. These additional questions are not compulsory, so if you're not quite sure, that's completely fine. But if you are able to add them in, that gives us even more power to the survey, enables us to get more information about those grasslands. And then the final page is just how to submit your survey. There's also a bunch of links on that last page to our website and some of the things I've mentioned already. So the training course and then also a feedback form. So hopefully that is a walkthrough of both downloading and completing your own survey. The next thing that you need to do is to think about where you would go and do a survey. So I think I said before that it doesn't need to be a huge open grassy area. It can be whatever grassy or grassland area you have in your local neighbourhoods. So we have lots of people that survey lawns, their local, school playing field, local churchyard. There's lots of different areas, and we want to get surveys from all these different types of habitats. So anywhere is good. And also, you can, if you have somewhere that you think could be good, but you go and do a survey and there's nothing there, that's completely fine. We still want that data if you see nothing, because that is just as valuable knowing where there aren't wax caps as where there are. So don't panic if you go and find somewhere and there's just nothing to be seen. That's also fine, and that's still really useful for us, even if it is less exciting from a fungi perspective to go and do a survey and there's nothing there. So with that, that was a bit of a whiz through of grassland fungi, their habitats, their importance, history of Waxcap Watch, and then how to do a survey itself. What we're going to do now is do a Q&A. So if people have questions about anything that I've talked about today, or just questions about grassland fungi in general, then by all means put that in the Q&A function if you can. That would really help. And myself and my colleague Rich will do our best to answer as many of those questions as possible. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so that I can see everyone as best as possible and see the chat and things like that. Okie dokie, let's see what's coming in. I appreciate this bit. When everyone's doing a bit of thinking, might take us a minute for a few things to start coming through, but I can see there's lots of stuff coming through. Where should we start, Rich?
Hello, yeah, we've had a few good questions in, and I think you just mentioned this just a few seconds ago, but just to reiterate, somebody was asking how important is it to record null returns? So when you've been to visit a site, it's in the middle of waxcap season, you'd be expecting to see some things, you've seen things in the locality, but the site that you're visiting doesn't have anything there. We'd really like that record data. It's actually something that is quite rare in all fungal data that we work with, because people only record the presence of having observed something. So we have this opportunity with this survey that you can return null returns, which, yeah, so please do. If you don't find anything, we'd love to know about it.
Yeah.
There's a second question which has actually come up a couple of times for folks that are over in East Anglia. And I think this is a good one to respond to. People are saying that they're not finding much over in East Anglia, and could they expect to find some? And the answer to that is it is an area which has had fairly heavy industrialized agriculture. And this is the case a lot with yeast. It's also generally a bit drier also, but that's not to say that it is completely devoid of good grassland sites. In fact, there are a few exceptional ones. I know, for example, Middlewick, which is very close to where I grew up in Colchester, has had a lot of attention recently for its amazing grassland diversity. So they are there in amongst the heavily overly ploughed fields. So do keep your eyes out. And in fact, really, in many ways, more important that we know about them there, because those are the sites that could hopefully propagate future grassland sites. So what else have we got here? Quick question about the online training course. You can find that on the Plant Life website. I think it's all under Waxcap Watch on our website there. So
yeah, there's links to it on the Waxcap Watch page, but we've got a whole page that's just with our training courses now. So you'll find the Waxcap Watch training courses there, and you'll also find other training courses that Plant Life has on there as well. There's 4 units, so you can kind of work through them at your own pace, but they're all linked in together.
Yeah. Another simple question, you can take this one, Aileen. Is there a time limit? Should we do it over particular dates?
There isn't a time limit per se. It's in terms of particular dates. We're in waxcap season now. Things are fruiting. We've had some rain. It's lots of things are popping up. So we'll be seeing lots of waxcaps now up until we get proper ground frosts. Once we start getting those proper ground frost temperatures, then the fruiting really dies down. So depending on when that is, normally it's at some point in December. Occasionally we get things fruiting into early January, but so yeah, anytime from now until probably some point in December is a good time to go out and look.
Yeah, it can depend on where you are in the country as well. I know that over in
Yeah.
Wales, things kicked off maybe a month or so ago. So it really does, yeah, depend on conditions, where you are. So any time of year, basically, is the answer for that one, I think, isn't it? Whenever you
Yeah.
see them.
Yeah,
The
exactly. Anytime you see them, and I think it's been different. This is well, it's different every year because it very much depends on what rainfall there's been, and all that kind of thing. And obviously, this year we've had a lot of drought, and that's impacted where things are coming in different parts of the UK. So yeah, but we're in October now, so basically, wherever you are, have a look because there'll probably be something somewhere.
Got another question here. I think this is just something just to reiterate things that Aileen's already mentioned quite a few times today. So just to confirm that the general part of the survey, we're not asking you to identify any species and not any quantities of your observations either. The survey data is if you see a red wax cap, you record a red wax cap, and that's that for the site. If you see a yellow or orange one, you record that, and that starts to add up the score. There's a slight difference with the new app in that we ask you some additional questions which you don't have to answer. So there are three options for a red wax cap: a small one, which gives you a size limit, a medium one, and a large one. So you can have three red records. That would give us a slightly different score. But if you just tick red, it just goes through as red and has the most common score for red. And in terms of if there are any species, there are these potential species records, but you're not expected to make those on every survey. And also, if you don't feel confident in identifying species, we don't need you to do those either. It's just this colour-based survey and some additional observations. And some questions in about a few questions in people asking about do we collect data sent in via iRecord? I think that's a useful thing for people to be aware of. It's a bit more challenging for us to get hold of data through iRecord a lot of the time. And things take time to actually be processed through their system when you submit them there as well. So the great thing about this Waxcap Watch thing, although it's not species level data entirely that we're getting, we are able to do some species level IDs from it, and we have access to that data straight away. As soon as you deliver a record, we can see everything that's happened there, and we process that generally all together at the end of the season. Picked up on any other questions in there that are standing out for you, Aileen?
Let's have a
Just,
look.
scrolling
We've
through
got a
them.
couple of people asking if they can do multiple surveys, multiple sites. Yes, do as many as you like in as
Please
many
do.
places as you like. And equally, if you want to do multiple surveys in the same site across the season, that's also great. We can collate and combine those records into one. So we'll have a total score for the site that we can do in our analysis. So, go nuts, do as many surveys as you like. I think our current record off the top of my head, I think our most number of surveys by one person is over 60.
Mm.
So yeah, I'll have to have a look and see what our number is. But if anyone wants to beat that this year, then go for it. It's more the
Yeah.
merrier.
So Katrina's asked a great question as well. Is do wax caps have any protection in the case of planning applications and things like that? And it's a tricky area that we work with. And there are species that are recognised in the UK on the global red list. So this is red lists of threatened species around the world. We actually have a huge number here of, just due to an update in the red lists earlier this year, 37 of our grassland fungal species occur on these global red lists, and that's an awful lot compared to many other places in the world, just sort of showing how important this grassland habitat is here in the UK. We really are a stronghold for it. And there are these site of special scientific interest criteria that are things that assign protection over sites, and the grassland fungi assemblage, waxcaps in particular, make up an important part of that, and that is how sites can obtain protection, and some that do for their grasslands, fungal assemblages, but something that certainly needs more work so that they get more protection. Other things that we work on in the background as well.
Yeah, and I can see a question that's just popped in on that, which is, can a site become designated as a triple SI purely because of wax caps? Yes, but there's
Yes.
not many. There's a handful of them, but they do exist.
Yeah, and we're hoping to see more and more of those coming through in time. There's plenty in the queue to potentially be assigned that status. Just a bit of a bottleneck in getting it through.
Yeah.
Um,
I can see a question here that's about saying, if we survey our gardens, do we only include the actual lawn, or can we look in flower beds, etc.? And similarly, if there's bushes and trees in the area, do we still survey around them or avoid? Primarily, you want to be looking in those grassy areas. Wax caps don't tend to be found around trees. So, as far as we understand the ecology of them at the moment, so this is something that we are still quite vague on in terms of our knowledge of the ecology of these species. But wax caps do not mix well with the mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with trees. They get outcompeted by them. And so you don't typically find them close to trees. And so probably if you are surveying in your own garden or areas where you've got trees around the edge or bushes around the edge, you're probably not going to see many wax caps close to them because they're going to be outcompeted by the mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with the tree roots.
in the same way, the disturbance in the flower beds where you've been, say, hoeing or sort of turning that over or moving plants in and out, that's also something they won't like. These are fungi that really like long continuity, no disturbance in the soils, no fertilizer or anything like that adding as well. So there's another great question there. If you do a repeat visit survey and new fungi have appeared, should you record those fungi seen previously, if still present? And the answer to that is yes. So if you've been there and you have done a survey where you recorded just, say, a red and a green wax cap, and you go back and you found, you go back 3 weeks later and you find a red, green, and then a white and a yellow and orange fungi, record all of those again. That's absolutely great. And what will happen when we come to look at that data down the line is that it will be condensed into a cumulative score. So we won't recount the ones that you did see before, but it's useful for you just to record everything you see each time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, you don't, it's not like you don't need to worry about remembering what you saw last time. Just, yeah, survey what you see and it'll all get collated in our data analysis. So yeah, go back and do as many surveys you like as on a single site. That can be really useful for us looking at how things change in fruiting throughout a season.
There's another question here about, is there a question on the app about the size of the site? And in this case, there isn't any questions about the size of the site, and there isn't really sort of an upper or lower limit. What we do when we get the data, if we want to look at and examine an area which we can see has had good records, we can use our geo software to basically work out what the site boundaries there might be, and that would give us an idea. So yeah, there's no need to record how much area you've walked over when you're doing your surveys. What else we got in here?
So we've got some questions that are about how do we know whether it's a wax cap compared with other fungi that we might see in grasslands, which is a great question. I don't know whether you want to start with that, Rich.
Say it again. Sorry, I missed that. Just reading another question.
About how we're comparing or identifying the differences between wax caps and other fungi that we might find in grassland. So people are trying to do this survey and they can see particular fungi in whatever area that they're in, but they don't know whether it's a wax cap or not.
Sure. So, you want me to fill in how wax caps generally look different
Yeah,
to other, species of the field?
I
Can be a little bit
appreciate it's
tricky, but one
yeah.
of the sort of the general useful characteristics I find for wax caps is that they are quite cartoony species. They have these very sort of soft and rounded kind of features compared to other fungi. So having a look underneath is quite helpful at the gills, and they'll often be very thick compared to other fungi, the actual gills themselves, sort of plates that are going round radially around the stem. They'll be quite chunky and they'll be quite distant from each other. Quite good to have a look at other fungi that are in the field and just turn them over and look at them side by side. So with lots of the others, you'll see that they're much closer together and much finer. Um, Generally speaking, they have these sort of even, waxy sort of surfaces on the outside. The colour's quite even, so you don't necessarily get lots of different colours on a cap all of the time, although you will sometimes get some that are red and yellow or some that are orange and yellow, and we get that sort of, like with the parrot wax cap, a whole mixture, but they are bright colours, and bright colours often throughout the entire fruit body, which in other species you might end up with more two-tone, different colours in the cap and different colours in the stem. So yeah, things with scales on the top and things like that are generally not going to be wax caps. Trying to think of other clear, obvious features. This is something we're planning on. Is this something we're looking at doing another sort of webinar at some point on, isn't it? On sort of like
Yeah, this will be something that
use.
will be something we're planning on doing in the future as this
Yeah,
kind of next step. Because obviously with Waxcap Watch, it is this kind of beginner level survey, and there are these kind of questions. But once we're getting into the kind of identifying wax caps, we start getting into the kind of the depths of it a bit. And so this is kind of more the stuff that we're thinking of in the training course that we've got, and then building on that as people go on, because yeah, it's a bit of a can of worms. Once you start, it's kind of yeah, you're in, and suddenly you're going to be recording fungi, and you're part of the club.
that's it exactly. It's a good thing to do from photos, I think, or from images at least, to help sort of support visual differences. Somebody here is asking, how do we report parrot wax caps? Ideally, we report those as green, but we have accepted they will sometimes be reported as a range of different colours. And with the parrot wax cap, it's always good if something's looking a little bit of a funny mixture of colours on the surface, to just pick one, don't go picking too many, and turn it over and have a look at where the stem comes up to the gills. And just at the top there, you should always find a bit of green left there, in which case record that as green. It's the only wax cap really that has that lovely bottle green colour on it.
So I can see one question here that's asking about the data being made available and how people can get the data. So at the moment, the data is available on request. So anybody that wants the data is very welcome to have it. So we have quite a few local record centres that have it. Or like NRW, Natural England, Nature Scott all have the data. We're hoping that in the future we're going to have the data will be available in some kind of online portal, so you don't need to request it, but it is available to anyone and everyone who needs access to it, and we hope that that will continue to get used more and more as more people become aware of this data set.
There are no problems caused if you submit data to Waxcap Watch and then submit it to another recording app or scheme. No worries at all. And obviously for the other recording schemes, you generally be recording species level data rather than the color data that we're collecting. So yeah, great. Please do.
Yeah, because I think Waxcat Watch it's something that we use in combination with other data sets, and so generally it's we use it, yeah, in combination with those others or as a starting point if we have no other information for a site. So it's that first step. And if a site looks like it has high potential, it's then we go out potentially and do more surveys there. But it's one tool amongst many.
Absolutely.
In terms of the question about getting help with the if you email into Plant Life, if you followed all of the steps on the website and it's not working for you, email into Plant Life and give as many details as possible about the specific issue that you're having. If you're able to send screenshots of the issue that you're having, that's super helpful. And we can send on some more information to you. So I mentioned we've got a detailed PDF. It's like 5 pages long, so it's a bit too in depth to have all of those instructions on our website, but that can really help with troubleshooting. And if that doesn't solve it for you, then we can hopefully help with whatever your specific issue is. But yeah, do let us know if there are any specific issues that you are having with the app, and we'll try and help you as best as possible with them.
Somebody's asked, can they ever be found in clearings within woods? And the simple answer to that is yes, yes, they can. There are quite a few waxcaps that will grow along woodland edges and occasionally also deep into woods as well. That's not an area where they will be necessarily found in high numbers or in high diversity, but they certainly can occur there. There is still sizable question marks around whether waxcaps once upon a time were more woodland species, and it's our changes in land use in Europe that have led them to be more grassland species. But so yes, they can be found there, but just for Waxcap Watch, we're generally just focusing on their occurrences in different types of grassland.
We've got a question that's asking about where you've said turning them over, whether it's okay to pick them.
Yeah.
If you are doing this for ID purposes, then it is okay. Don't go turning over every single one that you see somewhere, but if you're doing it to help you identify what something is, then that's entirely appropriate in this context. It's about doing the minimum possible to help you identify what's on a site.
And trying to, avoid that and getting into looking, and over time you'll develop the skills where you can recognize the ones you need to maybe look underneath, the ones where you don't. It's also entirely possible to look underneath if you have a phone with a forwards facing camera, so one that for you like the sort of selfie camera, you can use that like a mirror, put that underneath, get the camera so it lines up so you can see where the stem joins onto the gills, and you should be able to see that on your screen then, and that should give you a good enough indication of color. Whereas not all cameras can do that, so in those cases, yeah, pick one. Just be sensitive, and don't go picking. If it's one and you think it's a rare one, then maybe try and avoid picking it and just take as good a photos as you possibly can.
Yeah, and it's about being proportional with it, right? If you're out with a group of people, you don't need to pick, not 10 people don't all need to pick one. You can pick one and pass it around. So there's a there's a balance. We want people to be able to use the features there to identify, but equally these are vulnerable species, so there's a middle ground.
So a lot of questions about if there's a good app for identifying fungi, and I have to say I don't know that there is out there at the moment. Certainly, there's some really great resources online. Certainly, using the Facebook groups, the British Mycological Society's Facebook group is a really great spot. And the First Nature website, although it doesn't have loads of species, the sort of information on there is particularly helpful as well. Otherwise, you're onto sort of onto good field guides. I say is generally the way. The Collins Field Guides are a great place to start.
Yeah, and for waxcaps, the and grassland species in general, the Waxcap Watch Facebook group's also excellent. So I think those are probably all of those resources are going to be, better than most apps that are available. There isn't a kind of the same as you would for plants, that there aren't any really good apps where you can take photos of fungi and it will give you a approximate ID. There's none that are really accurate enough for that currently. I can see somebody saying getting an answer about best time of day. when you can see what's there. That, you know,
Not night
fungi,
time.
yeah. I think otherwise there's whatever time of day works for you. There isn't a, you know, fungi are kind of growing on long time scales compared with some things and short compared with others. They might only be around for a day or two, particularly when the weather's getting colder and it's getting frosty. But yeah, whatever time of day works.
Close focus binoculars, useful? Yes, absolutely. If you have them, they're really useful. I use them quite a lot for looking funky. Not so much in grasslands, but in woodlands, I find them really great.
There's a few questions about public versus private land. So we have a
Uh,
couple of places where you can, on the app, you can fill in the information about this. Um, if possible, if you're on private land, you know, it is better to have the permission of the landowner, and that is something that is recorded through the whether the land is public or private, and then if it is private, whether you have permission to survey the land. That's mainly for our data purposes. And so, yeah, if you are surveying on private land, then please do get permission.
think in terms of the general questions, I think we've got through most
And I think that
things.
there's a couple on just physically how to do the survey and how quickly to walk or whether to go on hands and knees and that kind of thing. Um, I think good starting point is to do a slow walk around somewhere and see if you can spot anything using that method. I think walk perhaps slower than you think you need to, and normally you will spot something once you get your eye in doing that. And then if you are spotting things, then by all means have a closer look at what you're seeing. But I think it's unlikely if you're not seeing anything from head height that you would suddenly find loads of things if you get close to the ground. I don't know whether you'd agree with me on that one, Rich.
Sorry, again, I was reading, looking for questions there.
Talking about surveys and saying that if people are do a slow walk around and they're not seeing anything, it's unlikely they're then going to suddenly see loads if they get down on their hands and knees to have a look. It's having a,
Yeah,
yeah, slow walk
yeah,
around and
that's,
trying to get their eye in doing that. They will probably get most things, at least with that initial look on a colour base. They're going to get it through
yeah,
a slow walk, you know, if you're
absolutely.
covering most of the area of a site. So quite often I tend to do a bit of a sort of a zigzag walk around the site and kind of just work my way around to make sure I've had a look at all the different areas. Another good way of doing it is if you've got different areas of a site where you can see the slight differences and maybe one area's got more moss and one area's got less, is to make sure you've covered slightly different types of vegetation that you might see in case wax caps are preferring one bit more than another, whether that's because of slight differences in the soil or changes in previous management. It's good to cover if you can see slight differences in the grassland. Make sure you've covered what different bits you can see as well.
Yeah. Great. I think that's probably getting to the end now. So should we wrap up?
Yes, thank you everybody for your time and for all of your questions today. It's great to see so many of you come here today, and I really hope that this has left everybody feeling confident to do their own Waxcap Watch survey. There's loads of information available on the website, and I hope that I will see lots of the names that I've seen popping up in the chat also popping up in the Waxcap Watch survey results that I will see popping up on my computer in the weeks to come. So thanks everybody again. And yeah, hopefully meet you at some point in the future.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.